What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with my final review of 2025, and we're ending off with a huge album, at least to me, for personal reasons. I am going over the latest offering from my boys from Norway, Blood Red Throne, with their new album, SILTSKIN. So this comes out on December 5th, this time on Soul Cellar Records. This is the band's 12th studio full-length overall, and, well, I've been reviewing this band ever since Fit to Kill came out. I almost forgot the title for a moment. Fit to Kill back in 2019, and then I've checked out their last two, Imperial Congregation and Nonagon, both of which I really enjoyed. More so Imperial Congregation. Nonagon was a very close one to making the year-end list last year. It just didn't quite stand out enough for me to put on the year-end list. It was still a really good album, but here we are with a new one, and actually a little bit sooner than I was expecting, because a few months ago I talked to frontman Sindre Johnson about the new material, and I assumed this was going to come out in like February at the earliest. Well, here we are in December, at the end of the year, and we get our first album in almost 2 full years, 23 months to be exact, because I reviewed Nonagon January of 2024. But here we are with a new album, and, well, again, most people who watch this channel should know about this band, considering I talked this band up in a big way. But for those who don't know, Blood Red Throne is a death metal band from Norway, which, as most people would expect, or most people would expect, I should say, is they're probably the most well-known death metal band out of Norway. Not that Norway isn't known for death metal. I mean, you do have some death metal in Norway, but the problem is there's just so much black metal in Norway that it almost suffocates Norway's metal scene to a degree. But here we are with a death metal band, and again, the most famous one out of Norway. Of course, I've been into this band ever since I checked out Fit to Kill. I've ranked their discography at least up to Imperial Congregation, and of course I've reviewed everything since Fit to Kill, and here we are with a new one. Now, one of the things that made Nonagon kind of fall in comparison to Imperial Congregation, at least to me, it didn't feel as energetic as Imperial Congregation, and what I mean is there wasn't as much of a thrashy element to Nonagon. It was mostly about the groove, which nothing wrong with it. I like the album for that reason, but I wish there was a little more thrashy bite to the songs. This album, I feel, kind of takes what they have done on the last couple of albums, like Fit to Kill, Imperial Congregation, and Nonagon, and kind of blend them all together, but improve on where they were on Nonagon. Like, this album has a lot more energy going for it. And real quick to talk about the production, Ronnie Bjornstrom does an amazing job once again at the production helm. Of course, Ronnie from Mesro, so he, again, awesome production and mix. I think I like this mix more than Nonagon, at least when it comes to the bass. The bass is a lot more prevalent on this album than it was on Nonagon, so that definitely helps. But in terms of the songwriting, it's a Blood Red Throne album where it's basically just like a hybrid of old school death metal, hints of brutal death metal, and even tiny little touches of melodic death metal, but I wouldn't say this is a mellow death album at all. This is still very much just death metal that just happens to incorporate some brutal moments and some melodic moments. Like, dare I say, this album's more brutal, yet more melodic than the last couple of albums. So, kicking things off with Scraping Out the Cartilage, you know, big chugs, but you also get some, like, cool harmonies and lead melodies. Like, for the most part, the lead melodies and harmonies on here were done very tastefully. Not like true blue, like, wankery solos or like crazy shred. It's just mostly about adding to the mood of the song. So because, you know, Dodd and Meathook, they both just work very well together in terms of riff writing as well as lead melody and harmony play. It's just awesome to hear what they do this time around. But with this opening track, it starts off with those chugs and harmonies and lead melodies before it unleashes into like death thrash territory, like Vader almost. Like, it's so thrashy and furious, and it gets into like a nice like thrashy gallop, and then even a double time groove. Like, double time comes in quite a lot on this album, and for the most part it's very bolt thrower-esque. Like, it's all about marching in the battle, or in this case just going after some jerk off with a knife and just slicing and dicing them to death, and it's just done with that double time sensibility. The breakdowns that show up on this album, there were only a few to talk about, but this one on the opener was pretty nasty, pretty brutal sounding, and I actually like how this album in particular builds on a lot of moods during certain sections. Like, there's eerie melodies that build up into big tremolo riffs and triplet chugs, and then we move into other tracks where you start to get into building up the mood. Tracks like On These Bones, that one actually starts off with a dissonant melody, which is not something I hear from Blood Red Throne that often. They do come in here and there on certain songs, or at least on one track every album, but this time, like, the dissonant melody, it fades in before it unleashes into just nasty riffing with some great blasting, like a thrashy rhythm to it. Even some rocking riffs going on here as well on this track. Tremolos and grooves, very much akin to Cannibal Corpse. I mean, there's definitely still a lot of Cannibal Corpse going on with this album, but I would argue not as much. Like, this album's kind of varying a little bit of songwriting as opposed to like just straight up like Cannibal Corpse worship or old school death metal worship. Like, it's going for some other aspects. Like, again, some more rock inspired riffs, even like almost technical angular riffing going on as well, and wild bass work. My boy Gunner, he shines on this album more so than on Nonagon because he's more prevalent in the mix, and bass melodies come in quite a lot on this album, like in the opening track, Scraping Out the Cartilage. I would also say in tracks like Necrolysis, I believe I got that wrong. Trying to look over my notes again. And hell, even on the closer, Marrow of the Earth, bass melodies galore on there. So yes, Gunnar Restian, he is just unleashing his bass playing presence once again. But triplet chugs come back more in full force on this album, which was another thing I felt was lacking on Nonagon. Like, to my recollection, there was only one track that had any kind of triplet chug. This album brings back the triplet chug, like on the opener, as well as the opening of Beneath the Means. Like, the triplet chugs and the tremolos almost feel like a hybrid of Entombed and Cannibal Corpse. Like, the triplet chugs of Cannibal Corpse, but the tremolos of Entombed kind of come together, which is really cool. Triplet chugs also show up in Husk and the Grain. Vestigial Remnants comes in with some triplet chug. Like, yeah, there are definitely more triplet chugs going on this album than you had heard previously. But thrash, like I said, thrashy elements come back on this album. Like, about 40% of this album, you get like a thrashy moment, like Scraping Out the Cartilage again, Husk in the Grain. Like, dare I say, that one definitely gets more thrash forward with some of the machine gun riffs. But also on the track, the way it opens with tremolo and blast beats kind of felt closer to Morbid Angel than anything else. Gallops along nicely, and the lower tremolos gave it like a more darker feel. Some double time once again showing up. Dare I say, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but even on Necrolysis, that track not only does it have like a lumbering riff, but dare I say some of the chug going on here with some of the weird rhythms, dare I say it gets a little bit Meshuggah-esque, but you also get like atonal and like technical angular riffs once again popping up in there in that track. Anadine Rust, that one I think is maybe the fastest song on the album, like, and it's the shortest one at under 4 minutes. Very Vader inspired. Like, it is like, again, fast with the blasting, the tremolos, the thrashy rhythms. It also gets very technical again. Like, this is arguably the most technical track on the entire album. But like I said, going back to the breakdowns, you get a few breakdowns on the album, particularly on Scraping Out the Cartilage, and Nadine Rust, and On These Bones. Those songs have some pretty brutal breakdowns for damn sure. Vestigial Remnants, that song, as well as I would say Husking the Grain and Scraping Out the Cartilage, brings in another element to this album, and that is riffs and melodies that feel more towards death a little bit. Like, there's a little bit of death going on here on this album with the melodies and even the harmonies. It kind of gives me nods to like stuff you would hear on really any death album, but I would say in particular like Spiritual Healing and Human. I would say those two albums in particular, you get like some of those harmonies and melodies and even some of the riff structure of a death track. But going back to the track, I would particularly the song Vermicular Heritage. That song was another single, and it's mostly like mid-tempo grossness. Builds up nicely. This is going back to like building up into something. Builds in the groove with an eerie melodic riff. And again, double time. It even gets into off time. Like, off time shows up a couple of times, which gives it a little bit more of a technical feel. But then we get to the last track, Marrow of the Earth. Longest track of the album at almost 7 minutes. Love how it starts, again, building up the mood with a clean melody. It's a lot darker sounding. For the most part, the song is lumbering, but it's got riffy chugs. Again, you get some off time going on here. Double time, thrashy riffs come in, but not with a thrashy rhythm and bass melody. Hell, even the, I guess you would call breakdown, it's more doomy than anything else, and even some spoken word, which is not something that comes in a lot on Blood Red Throne albums. But yeah, one of the big strengths of this album is the variation in the songwriting. Like, you get your staple old school death metal tracks, you get some thrashy bite, you get some triplet chug, you get some groove, you even get a little bit of technicality coming in, a little bit of like mood building. Like, this album, I feel, definitely has a lot more going for it than it did on Nonagon, as the songwriting on here felt a little bit more expanded upon than on Nonagon. Really, I don't really know if I can find anything to complain about, honestly. I mean, I feel like maybe Vermicular Heritage might have been the weaker track of the album, as it definitely did feel a little bit more towards just straight up groove. But that's not a bad thing. It's just, in comparison to everything else on the album, that's the one track that stands out as kind of being a little bit, I don't really want to say safe, because that's kind of not really what it's going for. It just felt the most ordinary out of all the other tracks, which, nothing wrong with being ordinary. But yeah, this album, I definitely think, blows Nonagon out of the water. No disrespect to Nonagon. It's a really good album, but I definitely felt like there was just a couple things missing on it. This album basically took what they were trying to go for on Nonagon, but combined it with what they were doing on albums like Fit to Kill and Imperial Congregation, just kind of bringing it all together into something that I think is really up to their standard, in my personal opinion. So overall, I'm going to give this 4.5 out of 5. This is definitely going to be on my year-end list, but where's it going to be remains to be seen, and I still got to work on the order of that list. But yeah, this is a massive step forward, in my opinion, for the band. So if you are a fan of, Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation, Death, Vader, I'd say check this album out and give the whole band a try. This band deserves more respect. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching, keep your horns high, and your dreams wet.